In this session, we'll talk about important aspect in data analysis, where we are interested in grouping the data. See, many a time the data that we capture in the raw form, I may not use it as it is for my analysis. If I really want to summarize it, I may be more interested in consolidating the data. I may be more and more interested in grouping it. Means some kind of translation of the data, of the raw data, needs to be done so that it can match with my business rules and I can understand my business more and more effectively. So, grouping is one major aspect, because just take an example. Let's say I have collected the data regarding the age of the person, right? So different people have given different ages. Now I want to group all these values in such a way, saying below 20 versus above 20, or teenagers versus above teenagers, or non-teenagers. So, or probably in some cases, let's say I have the data regarding number of children. I am more interested in looking at the aspects of the people who have children versus who do not have children, some kind of characteristics. So that way, I am more interested in looking at grouping the data. So these are all calling as grouping. So some of the dimensions, so again this grouping I can do one based on the dimension, or I can do the grouping based on the measure as well. So I can group the different members of the dimension into a single member. So if let's say there are one child, two children, three children, four children, all of them, I can group them into customers having children, whereas probably zero children, I say customers not having children. Or I could say this entire group of people who are below 20, I say they are teenagers, and who are greater than or equal to 20, I can call them as non-teenager. So basically the different dimensions I'm grouping into one single kind of a member of that dimension. I'm rolling up some of the members so that I can summarize the data much better. So we will first start with doing the grouping of the dimension. Different members of the dimension I want to group into a single member. Then after that we'll see, by performing some kind of calculations, how do I get into the grouping process, right? So for that I'm taking a simple data set to start with. I have a data set regarding the customer, right? I have the data set regarding the customer, lot of things about the customer, right from the customer ID we have a lot of other things, the geography, then the title, first name, last name, date of birth, etc. And for every customer we do talk about the number of children we have, okay, number of children at home, right? Or it's a total number of children that are there for the customer. We can typically look at this particular number. Alright, so we'll try to do some kind of an analysis. How many customers, how many children, or group anything 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, any number of children as with children, the others without children. So for that purpose, to start with, right, let me get this data source into Tableau. Right, I go to this, I connect to a data source which is an Excel, and I get the customer data there. Okay, the customer data, customer.xlsx is obtained. So this is my data source. Lot of things, fine. Now all I should do is go to the sheet. Okay, now these are all the different dimensions and these are the measures. I really want to find out how many number of children, right? The total children. I want to find out how many customers are there with zero children, how many customers with one child, and so on. Now this is a measure. This is the system is showing it as a measure, but I want it as a dimension because my question is how many customers with one child, two child. So corresponding to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want the total counting to be performed. So what I'll do, instead of keeping the children here, I'll drag it here. So my total children is a kind of a dimension now, it's not a measure. Now I'll pull this total children into the rows here. So it shows 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are the total children that are there, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And corresponding to this, I want to find out how many records are there in each category. So I'm pulling it here. So it says that 5,165 customers don't have a child, and 3,600 of them have one child, 3,700 have two children, and so on. Almost 1,400 customers have 5 children, and so on. So this is the one that I have. Now, my next aspect comes group. I say these are all the people with having children, and this is the group not having children. So I want to group, or one or lesser versus two and more, right? I want to make them into two different groups. So how do I do that? I go to this total children, whatever is the variable out here. I right click on it and I say create a group. I want to create two groups right now. The field name is total children. Now it's a group. Now my first group is these two, 0 and 1 I group, and I simply name it as 1 and lesser. So 1 and lesser or below 2, right? Below 2 children. That's my name of the group. Similarly, all these 4, I can create one more group and I say more than one child. So I say this is more than one child and this is below 2. 1 or none. Probably let me rename it 1 or none. So this is a group containing 1 or none child, and this is a group with more than one child. So these are the two groups that I have created, and I'm saying OK. So I can apply it and I say OK. Now we got a new dimension that got created, total children. So instead of now having 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can pull this children back. Probably I take this children. So it says there are 8,700 customers with one or none, no child, and there are close to 9,700 customers with more than one child. Right, I have got this, and probably I can even convert it into a graphical form. So this particular data I can very well convert it using a heat map. Heat map is just showing based on the dimension the size of the picture. So this is showing 8,700 is this, and 9,000 something, 9,700, 8,700. So these are shown more or less with the same size, and if required I can change it with the color as well. Rather than keeping it size base, I can make it color base. So what I can very well do, the number of records, I can simply pull it into the color, and I can do my color, and different kinds of colors are there, right? So we can choose the color of our choice. Let's say I want red blue color kind of divergence. I apply it. So wherein I could see the one that is lesser, one or none is having lesser number of values, so showing with a red, and higher number is shown with a blue. Some kind of a color differentiation is something which we can very well do. Alright. Okay, so we have this kind of a coloring that is being done. Now, okay, so now the same logic, let's say I want to continue a little bit more, and for each of these, so these are the number of families with one or more children or one or none, and these are the ones with more than one child. Now I want to link people with one or no children versus more than one child. What is the kind of sales behavior they have? Right? What is the kind of sales behavior they have? So for that, I want to bring my internet sales. I want to bring another data set which we have used earlier, which is the internet sales. So which was talking about the sales that was done for different kinds of customers. So for that I am adding one more data source to this data. So I'll say new data source, get an Excel file, the internet sales. Just for you to recollect, the internet sales was containing, okay, different products, different orders. These are the customers. Now this is where I can map these two data sets. So here the customer ID is there. There also the customer ID is existing. Right? So what is that I should do? I have to link these two. To use them, what I should do is I create a relationship. So I edit a relationship. Here I could see the primary data source is the customer and the secondary is the internet sales. And here there is a default relation that it has already created, customer to customer key. The customer key here is mapped with the customer key there. If required, if it is not something explicit, I should create the connection. But here the connection that is existing is customer key from the DIM customer or from the customer Excel sheet to the internet sales Excel sheet is what is coming up. So I'll say okay. So now when I come here, it is showing a broken relationship. So I click on this, there is a relationship that is getting created. Now I really want to see the sales for these two. Okay, so I'll drag the sales into the columns, which is telling me that this is the typical sales behavior. Right, around 14 million is the sales, or 14.36 million is the sales for people with more than one child. But they are doing more for, it's more for people with less than one or less than one child. The sales is like this. Now either I can do the whole summation and just do it, or probably, let's say, just to add something more spice to it, I'm interested in creating one more thing saying above average versus below average. I want to group the sales also, not just looking at the total amounts. I want to see how many are above average sales and how many are below average sales. So which means I am doing some kind of grouping based on a measure now. Right? So for that, what is that I should do? I will first of all go here, I do a calculation. So if I have to do the grouping here, it is purely based on a calculation. I can't create a group like this. Here I am creating a calculated field. And I'm calling that calculated field as above below average sales. Right? That's the name I'm giving to it. So here we are putting a simple formula. If you start typing it, things are very simple. If, right, some of the formulas, we'll discuss more about the formulas later. So I'm really looking at if the sales amount. So generally for that sales amount, we are always getting it as sum. Okay, if the sum of the sales amount, which is the individual sales amount value, is greater than, I'm looking at the average. We have, for average, we have something called window average. Window average is nothing but the average after the filtration of the data. If something is filtered, that would not be considered in the window average. But if I have taken a plain average, even if something is filtered out, even that would be shown as a part of my average. So I'll say window average, okay, sum of the sales amount. Then it is saying from where do I start? Start from the beginning till the end. So I have a last. So all this is, so when this happens, if the sales amount for each of the record is greater than the average which you have got right by computing the average from the first to the last, then we are calling it as above average. Else we are calling it below average, and that is what is our if statement ending. So we have created a simple code using the if, right, and simply I want to do an application of this. Okay, I have applied this. Now I really want to pull this field that I have created into the color. Now you see I get a different color differentiation. For more than one child, it's showing a lesser value, and for one child, it's showing a higher value. And we can very well bring out now, because this is a category. For different categories, different kinds of color combinations are being worked out. Now we have linked the two cells. So the ones that are showing below average, right now for the data we are able to create the above average and below average, and the kind of color combination is simply achieved. Probably if I drag this one here and probably pull this out, now it is clearly telling me that this is my above average sales amount, this is the below average. Now okay, let me drag this back. Let me take the above average and the below average, or let me put how many of them. Okay, let me take the above average here, right. Let me not have it here. The above and below average, it's a measure. Okay, it's a calculated value, right. Probably let me pull again the earlier one from the other sheet. Now I have got the total children here, right. For the total children, this is showcasing above average, and this is showcasing below average. Now I can get the sales amount. I am dragging the sales amount here. So by default, this is the sales amount that is coming out. Right now, if I don't have any of them, right now this is showing, this is what is one and one or none. This is the sales amount, and more than one child, this is the sales amount. Now I can even drag the above or below average. I'll drag it to the color. So suddenly we are seeing a different kind of coloring which has actually occurred, because we have different groupings that we have done, and corresponding to each of the grouping, it is really finding out whether something is above average or below average. So we have created a calculation that is more and more meaningful to the business user. The same logic, probably now, instead of children, let's say I want to really check out with respect to the cars. So let's see here in the customer data, we have number of cars owned. Probably if I take this number of cars owned here, and instead of looking at total children, let's say I want to look at based on number of cars owned, I get altogether a different. So the above average, the below average is shown with this kind of a symbol, I mean with this kind of color, whereas above average is shown with this kind of a color. We have created a group saying anything that is above average, we another group called above average, and anything which is below average, we simply set it as below average. And in the because I have dragged it into the color, it is simply showcasing orange is below average and blue is above average. And when I simply tried plotting the stuff, I'm getting a classification color wise. Above average ones are being shown with blue, and below average ones are shown with an orange. So there is a quick workout that we can very well do, differentiate with the color, help in understanding the things more and more effectively. So we have done a grouping, a grouping of a dimension measure, and at the same time we have done some kind of a grouping with respect to even a measure also. So one formula that we have introduced here, Windows average, that's a function or the formula that we have used. It is primarily to find out the average of the values which are in the Tableau view of the data. Right? So some data that is, if you have filtered out some data for some reason, that would not be included into the calculation of the average. So that particular data here, okay, this is the Tableau view. So whatever the data that is present only in the Tableau view here, because you might very well do a filtration of the data. So when you have done the filtration of the data, only on that filtered data this Windows average function will work. That's the reason for doing all this basic computations, we prefer using a Windows window underscore kind of functions rather than the plain ones. Plain ones consider the entire data. So they do not include the data that have been filtered. That's the reason we use the windows. And first and last simply talk about find the average starting from the first row till the last row. So we have done so many things here. One, we have linked the two sheets, right? We have done the linkage between the two sheets, which is the customer related sheet along with internet sales sheet. And then initially we have done the grouping of based on dimension, then we have done the grouping based on a measure, and then we have got the values from two sheets and summarized the stuff. So that's where we are slightly moving more and more deeper towards a much better and advanced data visualizations using Tableau. Thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.